Okay.
But it's just not, whatchamacallit.
Welcome to Milo On. I wanted to take a moment and welcome you all to the site. This will be our inaugural discussion. The objective of our site is to really talk about some things that are affecting our community at large, our nation, and our people, and to touch not only on the things that we're doing on the localized level, but to broaden our reach and expand our thinking beyond our individual communities and to that of the global community. I hope you'll enjoy your time visiting with us.
Keep rolling. Give a little more details in terms of, get a little more specific about what you just said. That overarching thing you just said, make that more specific.
Okay. So I'm Milo Pinckney, serial entrepreneur, currently the managing director of American University of Integrated Sciences, a four-year American medical school located in Barbados in the British West Indies. I've always had a vocal opinion on a myriad of issues spanning politics, business, social welfare, and cultural issues, both domestically within the United States and abroad. But most importantly, I've enjoyed a passion for people. And I think that in keeping with that passion, not that my ideas are always the best, but they're mine, and I like to share them with people who wish to hear them. So I hope you enjoy what you hear with us.
That's a great one. That was a good one. Let's go closer. That was perfect. Kind of talk a little bit more about, you mentioned how the idea of generally what we're going to do here is.
So one of our objectives is to kind of serve as a catalyst to creative and open thinking, and to create a venue where discussion can be had that enables people to not only share their thoughts and ideas, but to initiate action on them. Discussion is great, and exchange of dialogue always helps to enhance understanding. But in the absence of executed action, little ever is achieved. We hope to break that pattern. You know, I've had the opportunity to work with a broad cross-section of people with American University of Integrated Sciences, and it's been an incredible honor and a pleasure. But more than that, it's been an incredible learning experience. It's broadened my horizons, both intellectually, socially, and culturally. But it's also helped me to better understand some of the challenges, both domestically here within the United States and globally, that we need to address. And we need to address them at each and every level, not only as citizens, but of citizens of the world. In my business life, I try to do so by marrying a solid social agenda to all of my business activities, which I think is an important component of who we are as an organization and where we're going. Business has to do well to be economically viable, but it has to be committed to doing good to be socially valuable. And I think that our creation of AUIS speaks consistently with that philosophy, and we use it as a guiding principle of our day-to-day operations, both here and in Barbados. So, you know, let me speak, if I might, directly to that and in less abstract terms. As we know today, there is a well-documented physician shortage in the US and Canada. And AUIS has the opportunity to make a contribution to fixing that wrong. And one of the ways that we can do it is by creating quality educational opportunities at lower costs and make those opportunities available to a broader cross-section of students who wish to be doctors. Not who wish to be doctors simply because of the projected economic reward, but because of a passion and commitment to their fellow man. And a commitment that is supported and embraces the cultural and ethnic diversity that is reflected on our campus. And it's something that we're most proud of. So I think that theme translates through most everything that we do.
This is good stuff.
Yeah.
I want to send the link to myself and Sage so I can monitor it while you continue to kind of chat.
Yeah, it's hard talking to myself.
That's the reason why I'm here.
Yeah.
That's why I'm here. Copy.
This is Nick. His barber went on strike.
Can you put Sage and myself in there?
Yeah. Sage. Nikolai.
Just put copy, paste into the body of it. Yeah, it's already copied. Perfect. Just send it on over. We'll monitor it. So, give us an idea of also a couple of things I want to get recorded are idea of essentially you touched on you have this broad business experience. Touch on how this is the culmination of some of those experiences and your upbringing to a certain extent. And this is something we'll dive into on a specific podcast. But the general idea is initially I almost want to put out like 10 to 15 minute clips of Milo Pinckney talking about certain topics, and then eventually develop a following of people who are tuning in for these specific topics. And then if we eventually want to, we can go live with them at some point, and you and I can do a live conversation. But the idea is to hit on interesting topics, do 10, 15 minute clips of you conversing on a topic, and then see what type of followers we can develop. So hit on that.
So you may ask why you should even care about what I have to say or who I am. So let me give you a little history on my background and why I think I have something worth hearing. I grew up in the 60s in the North Shore of Long Island. My father was a OBGYN raised in the Deep South in St. Matthew, South Carolina. His family moved to Harlem in the 40s, or in the 30s, I guess. And he went to medical school at Meharry Medical College, a traditionally black college. Attended Lincoln University for undergraduate, and then on to Meharry, and then on to serve in World War II. He returned to New York after the war and opened a practice in Hempstead, Long Island, predominantly servicing entertainment folks from the St. Albans community. And he became a very active participant in the 60s civil rights movement, funding and supporting the progression of the movement. And he raised 4 boys who he provided a extraordinary education and life opportunities to. But in his achievement, his economic achievement and his professional achievement, he continued to reinforce in my brothers and I the need to be responsible, that with our privilege came responsibility. And he taught us that the single greatest privilege that a man has is to raise a family, support his community, and better those that follow him. And it proved true in his life, as he came from very humble beginnings. His mother a domestic, his father a butcher, barber, and pullman on the railways. And he became a stellar success as a physician and serial entrepreneur himself. And he raised 4 boys, a lawyer, a senior official in Microsoft, and a son who became an actor and restaurateur, and myself. And in all of his activity, he continued to remind us that with our opportunity came responsibility, but that he wasn't the one who was going to tell us what to do or direct us how to demonstrate that responsibility. We were going to have to find it ourselves and make our own mark. So I started off fast forward to my career, I started off as an entrepreneur very early. Actually started my first business in high school and had businesses throughout college and then after. And in building each one of these businesses, I found that at one point, and I can't really tell you what the threshold was, but there was a point in time where I realized that the economic success of business, the scorecard is your bank balance. And when I achieved a bank balance that some would find impressive, I found that I wasn't very fulfilled with the process. that what I truly enjoyed about the entrepreneurial experience was solving the problems, but more than simply solving the problems was bringing others along on the journey and creating their opportunity and watching them develop and grow. I guess secretly I'm a closet teacher. So fast forward to the early 90s, I get involved in medical management, and I see a consistent thread of deficiency in the medical profession. Physicians are not trained in the business of medicine, nor are they trained to identify all of the methodologies available to best treat their patients. They learn what they learn at whatever the focus of their school is. I had the opportunity to get involved in an international medical school, which I did. And again, in that setting, I saw the same pattern projected. The school was purely interested in the economic reward of moving as many students through their halls as they could. And they taught nothing about the business of medicine, nothing about the philosophy of medicine, and nothing about the cultural responsibility of medicine. Now, fast forward to 2013, I had the opportunity to actually acquire that very school that was the impetus to my exposure. And in doing so, I set out to change what I believe to be a problem and a known deficiency. And that is American University of Integrated Sciences, which now actively works to not only promote a solid traditional Western allopathic medical program, but enhances it with a solid thread of NIH-recognized evidence-based alternative modalities, or what we call CAM strategies, complementary and alternative medicine strategies. And in doing so, I believe what we are producing today is a more robust, well-rounded physician. And now we're excited to bring on the next phase of our development, which is to embed a solid business of medicine program as well. So we're growing and learning in the process. And we're hoping to continue to create opportunities for the unique students that embrace our philosophy and our vision.
What can you tell me about, or what would you say to a kind of non-traditional student who's out there, thought about medical school, and maybe someone didn't support that idea, or maybe they weren't really in the right place when they were coming out of pre-med or coming out of their bachelor program? What do you say to someone who's a non-traditional student? What type of opportunities does the Caribbean offer? Or, how does that student feel?
I think that the non-traditional student, and I think you have to define who the non-traditional student is, because non-traditional is kind of a broad term. I think for AUIS, the non-traditional student is typically an older student who has completed their undergraduate education, in many cases entered the workforce and served in the workforce for some number of years and realized that they missed their calling and wanted to be a physician. And AUIS represents an opportunity that's not available to them in traditional medical schools, especially in the case of US and Canadian schools. I think that student, I'm hoping that student becomes the traditional student, because that is the student who's not there for the paycheck, but is there for the mission. And I see it in our students. I can think of one of our students who rings out, Monty Sala. And Monty, here's a student who worked in a furniture store for 10 years, and then decided he was going to become a physician. And this kid knocked it out the park. I mean, he worked hard. He's got a lot of obstacles and hurdles to overcome, and he's met each challenge with stellar performance. And he's going to be a phenomenal physician. And not only is he going to be a phenomenal physician from a clinical perspective, his humanity is going to ring out in his clinical practice, because he's a stellar human being. And I think that's what's unique about the many of the students. And I won't limit that description to just AUIS students. I think to a great extent, many of the students that enter the Caribbean system do so because they did not have an opportunity, or they missed an opportunity in the States. And the Caribbean was their last chance, and they seized it and made the best of it. And they worked twice as hard, and sometimes 3 times as hard as their American counterparts. So The non-traditional student, I think the non-traditional student needs to be the new traditional student.
Makes sense. Makes sense. We're going to do a whole conversation about this, but give us an idea, give us a kind of couple sentences about the idea of sending your child off to the Caribbean to study medicine. And, you know, at some point we'll have a full conversation to relate that to your situation, what you've experienced with sending children off. Maybe that's not for today. We'll go into more depth on that. But what would you kind of say to someone that's considering sending their child off, or someone who's considering, you know, sending themselves essentially off to Caribbean medical school or medical school abroad?
You know, when I'm asked what I would tell a parent who's contemplating their child embarking on a Caribbean medical education, I would tell them that they need not think about it as a Caribbean medical education, that they're sending their child off for a medical education, and that their child has had the broadness of thought to avail themselves of a diverse cultural environment that they're not likely to equal in a U.S. education. I think that the Caribbean represents not only a great alternative, lower cost opportunity for medical education, I think it's a medical education that's enriched with so many other variables that domestic U.S. and Canadian education can't offer. You know, I think the rubber meets the road when parents ask me, you know, would I send my kid to AUIS? And, you know, our standard at AUIS is predicated on my children. I make most every decision that I direct our school to act upon based upon what I want that decision made for my kid. And I think, so when asked would I send my kid to a Caribbean medical school, I'd send them to this Caribbean medical school, and I'd do it in a heartbeat. You know.
So we've got a couple of chats coming in here. Maybe let's slow down a bit with regards to our speaking. Excuse me, that's the interviewer. That's me. Excuse me. I'll slow down a bit. He's asking what's the history of Caribbean medical schools. So,
the history of Caribbean medical schools is actually very interesting.
So you've been in this field for some time, actually. You have some experience going back maybe over a decade, from what I understand.
Longer than that, actually. I personally got involved in the Caribbean medical school business in 1993. I got my first exposure to it in 1972, and learned more about it as my roommate in college in the mid 70s went to a Caribbean medical school. So I've had a lot of background in Caribbean medical schools, but speaking about the history of the Caribbean medical school, it was created, the first Caribbean medical school was St. George's. It was created in 1972 by Dr. Mordecai. And it was created in response to the increasing difficulty students were having getting into U.S. medical schools because of the deficiency in number of seats available and the extraordinary costs. It also, the other challenge that faced American students was that in those days, U.S. medical schools were predominantly white outside of Lincoln and Howard. And Harry and Howard medical schools. And there were not many opportunities for students of color or diverse ethnic background. These schools came out and they were originally called Fifth Pathway schools, and they had an alternative path that took advantage of a little known nuance in the regulations, and it created an opportunity for students to study abroad. Any student or physician trained outside of the U.S. is required to have U.S. clinical experience. And then with that U.S. clinical experience, it makes them eligible to apply for residency within the United States. So what Dr. Mordecai created in the original school was a relationship with a U.S. hospital, the teaching hospital that provided the clinical clerkships for the students. And these students could leave the U.S., go to Grenada, do their basic science studies, and then return to the U.S., mainly in Brooklyn initially, where they went to their clinical studies in hospital and gained the U.S. clinical experience, and then they qualified through ECFMG to apply for residency match in U.S. residency programs. And once they completed a U.S. residency, they were eligible for licensure in the United States, and that's how it came about. Post the creation of St. George's, a number of additional schools came: Ross, AUC, SABA, and a bunch of others, including AUIS's original school, St. Eustatius, which opened in '99. And the proliferation of schools throughout the Caribbean came because A, it was a good business model, but B, because the U.S. health medical education system did not have capacity to train sufficient number of doctors to meet the number of doctors that were leaving the system. So the shortage of physicians was increasing. And that's really where it all came about. So the question on the table is expensive U.S. medical school versus AUIS. You know, what's the difference? Same education, or is it different? And it's a fair question. Let me tell you a little bit about medical education. Pretty much every one of the Caribbean schools, now there's 31 U.S.-based medical schools currently operating in the Caribbean basin. And I would say that just about all of them teach the exact same curriculum. And the reason that is the case is because they are all teaching to the USMLE, the United States Medical Licensing Examination Standard. So they take a curriculum that is recognized by ECFMG and approved by ECFMG, and they're all teaching off the same curriculum. Now, what differentiates one school from the other is how well they teach that curriculum and what things they do to enrich in that curriculum. And as a result, you'll see that many of the Caribbean schools have developed reputations, or I'll be so crude as to call them brands, where they are known for things like being good family medicine physicians or good research physicians, or having better bedside manners, because their school teach to those nuances. And but the greater majority of them, the academic program is identical. Now, where they differ is in cost and the quality of delivery. A great number of the schools, especially today, because of the absence of student loans available to their students, have adapted marketing efforts that target a different audience. There are schools that are targeting foreign students, Indian, African, and they have very low tuitions. The instructors are PhD level, master and PhD level instructors. They have physician instructors who have never practiced in the US, and that compromises the integrity of their academic program. And then there are programs like AUIS, where all of our instructors are MDs, and in many cases, if we're talking numbers, 86% of our instructors are MD PhDs. So they hold dual degrees, and they've all been licensed practicing physicians, and many of them have actually practiced in the United States or have sat the USMLE exams, to which is the standard to which they're training their students. So these little nuances differentiate this one school to another. I think that obviously I'm AUIS centric. When I speak of AUIS, I do so proudly because of how committed our program is to a standard of excellence. And we've sought not to be a Caribbean medical school, but to be a medical school, an American medical school that happens to be located in the Caribbean. And when you speak to our provost, Dr. Penny, or to our president, Dr. Agnaholtry, and you hear how they approach the program, we're laden with technology. We're not only teaching to the USMLE and the MBME standardized exams, but we are teaching clinical skills early in the educational process so that our students are better prepared for US clinical experience. So I think these are the things that differentiate one school from another. And then obviously, you know, the most fundamental level of differential rests in cost, as some of these schools are simply mills and have little interest in academic integrity and are just churning numbers. And, you know, they have tuitions that are in the $5,000–6,000 range, and they take any student who rings their phone.
Can you end the stream?
Yeah.
Let's do a couple of different ones here. So we'll do a couple different ones. This is good stuff.
Okay.
This is good stuff. Come on.
Hey, Rich.
Come on in, Rich. Sorry, I thought we were saying come on in.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so I did the disc clean.
Oh, good.
It ran, and then it says you still need.
Okay.
And I don't know what else to do.
All right, I'll take a look. Are you like working
And
on
then
a Cecil B. DeMille or something?
Yeah,
You got
and then
2 camera views. And
yeah. But then the other problem is that you IT people put an IT password. I can't do anything. So it keeps asking me, you know, do I have the IT password? I don't have authority to make a change.
I love that Sage.
Joe said it came across good.
Yeah.
It came across really good. We just ran a little. You want to see?
Sure.
How it came across?
Where at?
And yeah.